I'm Karen Phillip, a passionate advocate for doing good. I always knew I was going to have a career helping people, but I wasn't sure how. I've met some amazing people who seem to understand the what and the how of doing good. We often hear about their work, but who are they? I decided to have a space where they could share about their work and common sense steps to doing good better. All right, so welcome to Common Sense Steps to Doing Good. Today I have with me my guest, Ranako Bailey, and he's also a do-gooder, and part of his doing good is having a podcast, WeTalkingBois 246, and we're just going to talk about our challenges, our victories in doing good, and also trying to create our own media so that our voices could be heard by the masses out there. So welcome, Ranako.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Yeah, so Ranako, you have your own podcast. This is my first season, first try at this thing. I'm
That's
brand
fine.
new. Like, how has this process been for you? As in, for you, you're a bit more of a veteran in this space than I am.
I wouldn't consider myself a veteran. Actually, we actually released the fourth episode yesterday.
Yes.
I think, funny enough, the name We Talking Boys, the organization has a podcast name in itself, weirdly, and we always knew that, but we never really had, in terms of not necessarily the courage, but in terms of the manpower to really push to actually, start a podcast, but not just start. We wanted that when we started the podcast, we would be able to commit
to doing it.
For a foreseeable amount of time. And then some of our, I guess you call, for lack of a better word, stakeholders, friends, would have kind of just gently nudged us. We did first episode, and actually in episode 3 or 4, I think episode 3, we actually moved into the studio, and that was really interesting. And funny enough, when we moved into the studio, we kind of touched on a slightly controversial topic, but it was well received, and that showed me specifically how a simple conversation on these things, the vibe was there. It was very
Conversation on what things?
So
what is We Talking Boys, and what are the things that we're talking about?
So We Talking Boys is a NGO in Barbados. We also have a few members in Trinidad and Tobago. I love Trinidad. And we would have started, focused on men and boys, men and masculinities, and it would have started on the two premises. One, the co-founders would have actually, during COVID, believe it or not, we understood that we needed a space, and as I was sharing in the podcast episode that we just released, We Talking Boys actually started out as me forwarding messages to 4 persons, forwarding messages to 3 other persons, and got tired of forwarding messages, the same messages to 3 persons, started a group chat, and then the group chat began, and it expanded into a Discord server, and then what we have today. And then the second premise that we base ourselves around is particularly around GBV.
What is GBV?
Gender-based violence, sorry. And one of the things that we understand is that the facts are facts. Men, often are the most perpetrators when it comes to GBV. So what we do at We Talking Boys, we challenge ourselves. How do we move? I like to say, how do we move men from a position of cause to be one of solution? Because and there's always a quote that we always use. Can't remember the name of the author immediately, but basically says that if women could have solved this by themselves, they would have solved it a while ago. So in understanding the role that men play.
Yes. Hold on. No. Yes. If women could have solved this, we would have solved this a long time ago. Could we unpack that statement? That statement is so heavy and so needed a discussion about that, because it often sounds like, you feminists always talking, and you're talking to the women. But the women are also talking to the men. But it's not, the movement isn't happening the way that we would want to see it, or the quickness in which we wanted to see it. And there's a need for allyship.
Agreed.
There's a need, and I know the pushback is always, but men suffer too.
I'm laughing because, I've been in spaces where even as I was sharing earlier, we were on Friday in the gym. I don't know how that happened. We just randomly, the entire gym just randomly had a all-male conversation. And one person, when somebody asked me if it was a feminist, one person said feminist femininity, and I had to stop them, and I said no.
Yeah.
What feminism looks at is the equality of all.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, I guess in terms of comprehension and quick analysis, people always think feminism, femininity, and not necessarily seeing the overarching themes when it comes to equality for all, as in equality for men as well. So yeah, I think.
Yeah, and that the fact that it's not that women are trying to replace men.
Correct.
Women have always been working. Women just want to have pay for their work and be able to stand before the court or have bodily autonomy. Be able to get a tubal ligation without having to have their partner sign consent. And when we say, so We Talking Boys are trying to create that space for where men are able to be allies in the fight against gender-based violence. That's what I understood you said.
Correct, yes.
But what made it like your passion to have this space for men?
I think what made it, I often say that gender found me and I didn't find gender. And it's really the truth because I remember in secondary school, and this is going to sound really strange as to what I do professionally now, I started off in secondary school wanting to be a chef.
Okay.
I went from chef, and then I wanted to get into paramedic science.
Okay.
How the switch happened from paramedic science to,
okay.
I don't know.
My siblings don't let me forget that. My first thing was like, I want to be a bikini artist. Not just an artist, a bikini artist. Okay? It's okay. Yeah. We're here now.
So here I am. And I think, funny enough, it kind of started. We had a conversation about this earlier. But funny enough, it really did start with a teacher at Queen's College encouraging me to apply for the High Commissioner for a Day at the High Commissioner in Canada in 2017.
Okay.
And they would have formed a group with us that would have applied. Mm-hmm. And from there, I found an interest in gender and development. Funny enough, and then that passed on. I went to UE, met Leanne. I went to UE, met Leanne, and I think, as I said, the rest is history. And that's how I kind of just described that gender found me. And then over the years, working with particularly around 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, as a man, hearing that men are the main perpetrators of violence, I don't want to say I got frustrated in hearing it, but it was like, okay, this is the facts. But what are we doing, again, and that's how that phrase came about, to move men from a position of cause to solution? Okay. It's not necessarily the easiest thing because of Caribbean masculinities, but that's effectively how the group was formed under the framework of how do we move men from a position of cause to solution. And we thought peer-to-peer conversation and peer-to-peer education was the best approach.
Okay, and so besides the podcast, how else do you do this peer-to-peer?
Yeah, so I guess more recently we are expanding our physical spaces. So we do have a workshop next week on conflict resolution with young men and boys. We would have, I remember having some team members in Trinidad. We found that it was important for me to understand the difference in culture. And I remember my first visit to Trinidad. Within less than 24 hours, I was culture shocked. Within less than 24 hours, I was culture shocked. And I think what the team did was a really good job. Hats, clap to them. They ensured that, I wasn't getting this surface level that most people may get in Trinidad, but I was right into the meat of the matter. I remember my first engagement, there was a program with men and boys in a secondary school. And I was shocked because in Barbados, we tend to be a bit more reserved and in talking about certain topics, but here these group of young men are just bam, it's just and there's no filter, and I really enjoyed that, but it very much was a culture shock coming from Barbados.
As a Trinidadian, in my life skills teaching area, I did try that was one of my activities I had to do. I had to go into schools and teach life skills, and it wasn't go into what Trinidadians would call the prestige schools or Bajans would call the old schools. It was going into the schools.
Yeah.
Petite, 5'2", bougie, little red savior coming to tell them about anger management because, you just need to learn how to express yourself correctly. And they're just watching me like, Mom, do you have any idea what my life is like? Could you even possibly relate to me? So even you're saying that you had a culture shock because you moved, you did a session like that in Trinidad. There's even culture shocks within one's country. Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I got accustomed to obviously being in the country because I remember, in our initial days, you'd have done a lot of work, collaborative efforts with IGDS. And we would have gone into schools.
Sorry, what is IGDS?
Sorry. The Institute for Gender and Development, Nitabara unit, and we would have worked with some of Leanne's program. Shout out to Leanne again. And we would have gone into schools and interacted with different persons. And I think I remember outside of that, moving from that, program and actually just being asked to speak at a secondary school, one of the schools that, persons don't necessarily praise often here. And it was a little difficult to get them, engaging and get them to understand that, this, what happens here, stays here, it goes no further. But eventually, as they warmed up, I think it was one of the best conversations that I've ever had. And to this day, I remember it because oftentimes, again, in Barbados, we still have that, hierarchy in terms of schools. And this school in particular is not one of those that are seen as quote-unquote prestigious or one of the older schools. But they were able to connect with what we were saying. And I enjoyed them being extremely unfiltered and just being themselves. It was so natural. And yeah, I always remember that's one of the memories I'll probably always keep.
So that's like one of your triumphs. That's like one of the things that changed the way you viewed your work.
Yeah, because I think oftentimes, WeTalkingBois started with a group of about 4 of us. I would say, well-educated, and so there was a certain level of, I guess for lack of a better word, probably privilege within the founders, even though we all came from extremely different backgrounds. But engaging with outside of ourselves, I think that's always been interesting. Our Discord server actually would have started with majority university students, but then when non-university students...
Can I ask you a slightly... I don't want to say old person question.
What is Discord? What is Discord?
That is ages. I honestly don't know what Discord is, and this is the second time you've mentioned it.
Yeah, so Discord, effectively, how do I summarize this? It's a platform, and I wouldn't say a social media platform, but it's a platform where primarily used for gaming. So for example, you would game, and you would have like a channel with a group of your friends, and you would go on, instead of, for example, having a group call or WhatsApp while gaming, you would go on Discord, and the Discord usually connects to the game, so you can speak whilst being in the game.
So that's like, this is going to age me as well. Do you know the Leroy Jenkins video?
No.
It was viral back then, where they were playing on a call and they were talking to one another. And he just ran in and just bawled his name out and killed everyone, I think. And they were just like, Leroy. So in my limited knowledge of gaming, I think I understand what you're talking about. But I also think that's very innovative to use a gaming platform.
It's not...
It's not gaming
per se, but
you're meeting them where they are, which is like the first rule of social work. Meet people where they are, which is one of the reasons my approach was not always connecting with the persons that I was trying to teach life skills, because I didn't understand where they were.
Yeah, it was really interesting because I think when we first started, we knew we were tackling young men. we knew, where we should, but there was also a learning curve as well. So, for example, there was a set of there's a demographic of our group that, may go on Discord.
Okay.
But then there's also a major demographic that we've learned since then that's on Instagram. So what we used to do, we used to have, because you can have live discussions in Discord. We moved from live discussion in Discords to Instagram lives. And kind of as reflecting on that, believe it or not, for the first 2 years of our operation, relationships was the heaviest. Relationships was like, we were talking about relationships for 2 years. And it wasn't that we were talking about relationships because we had that planned.
Yeah.
We allowed persons to choose what they want to talk about. And everything for the first 2 years was heavy in relationships. And that was, I always wondered why.
It's the need to belong. It's the human need to
Yeah,
belong, right?
but-
At least for me, I don't always have the soft skills and whatnot, and I'm socially awkward. So
I don't think you are.
Boy. It took a lot of self-work and a lot of being like, oh, when somebody asks you for your opinion, they mean to agree with them? Oops, I didn't realize that. Like, I thought if you wanted my
Opinion that you wanted your
you
opinion.
wanted my opinion, and I was going to give it to you. So, relationships, whether platonic or romantic, they are work. Yeah. So relationships are hard work, and you have to be self-aware and be willing to do the work to be able to have sustained relationships over time. So I think it's kudos to y'all to spending that time and not being like, we are on a program, time to move on. But that's also some of the challenges that we face as do-gooders, knowing when to listen and to act or when to stay in a situation. What are the challenges that you have experienced in doing good?
Yeah, I think, the initial challenge obviously was the fear of opposition. The reality is, as the co-founders would tell you, WeTalkingBois was something on my mind. Well, we didn't necessarily call it WeTalkingBois, but a group where men can share with each other and share in an unfiltered way without any judgment or whatever was always an idea. It started with a group of 4, which is the co-founders, but the fear of opposition would have delayed the actual implementation for many years, actually. Well, not many years. Not that long, but a couple of years, I should say, until one of the co-founders was like, let's just get this done. And I think one of the things that I really value about being on the team for WeTalkingBois is that the co-founders are, firstly, a group of really good friends. And we continue to try to exhibit that across the team, even over the board and, the whole shebang, to keep not necessarily not asking for best friend relationships if that's not what the person wants, but to have that kind of relationship in terms of understanding each other has helped us in terms of checking ourselves when we needed to be checked, and being able to work together in spaces and people seeing that and being comfortable with that.
Okay, so I think you keep driving home the importance of community. You keep driving home the importance of a good support system. But you mentioned casually, but I'm going to go back to it, the opposition.
The opposition,
Because this is a pilot for me, doing a podcast, pilot season. I don't know how it's going to be received. I don't know if anyone is going to listen. I don't know if persons
I will.
I don't know if persons who don't like me are going to listen just to give me negative ratings. And then we see popular figures in social development or just in life in general, people just waiting for them to trip and fall. So when you talk about opposition, are you talking about similar fears that I have, or are you talking about opposition and I don't know, you tell me what kind of opposition you were afraid of?
So the opposition I was afraid of was again, being in kind of the academic space. Personally seeing it as, oh boy, another men's group. Here we go again. And I mean, there's a fair reason why that's, but, that was a fear, One is people are going to perceive it to be, oh boy, another men's group where they continue to praise themselves and not talk about, certain issues and not talk about things like patriarchy, hierarchy, and these important things that really need to be talked about. And then the second opposition that I was afraid of at the time was how would it be received? Am I going to launch this and then absolutely nobody shows up? Am I going to start this and, as you said, kind of going on to what you were saying earlier, the persons who I did not necessarily think were out for me will see an opportunity to be out for me.
Yes. Yes.
So those are the two types of fears of opposition.
Right. Because that also, I mean, that's something I think of. A lot of the stance that I had when I was younger, those thoughts have changed and I've progressed into new thoughts. And when I'm doing good, I'm like, is somebody going to call me a hypocrite? Because I've changed positions. And hearing you talk about this stuff too, and I'm like, yeah, it's really hard because it's more than just on the surface, it's thoughts, prayers, and policy, right? Like that's what we hope for. But in reality, there's so much behind that, and not everyone gets a glimpse into who we are and and why we're doing it. And that's one of the reasons for this podcast too, because I felt like in the development section, I felt like in the social development sector, we preach a lot. You need capacity building. You need this. You need that. You need. But who are we? And I'm asking that question. I'm afraid to show who I am because being out there makes you open to opposition, as you call it. But at the same time, is it needed?
I think after 4 years of working with WeTalkingBois, it is needed.
It isn't.
I think one of the things, every time that I've been overly fearful about opposition, I've been fortunate enough to see the opposite. So, for example, when we started and when we did the episode around allyship, I was cautious in terms of obviously what was happening in the public space. But weirdly, many persons enjoyed and were really grateful in terms of the level of detail that we went through that episode. So the times where I've been fearful, again, I come back to the community and support. Even though I may have some opposition or some questions about it, I call it a push because sometimes we need a push. And capacity building is really good. All these things are really good that you speak about. But sometimes, and I think one of the things that I've learned and understood is sometimes you just have to do it, make the mistake, and learn from it. And that's rough, right?
Ooh, he come here to preach to me today.
It's rough. I mean, it's really rough because when we started Discord, we made some mistakes. And there are some mistakes that, well, depending on how you class mistakes, well, they're all mistakes that we make. And we learn. And the important thing is to learn from them. And with WeTalkingBois, I'm forever fearful that one day somebody's going to be like, this is what it is. Even more recently, I was in a space this week, and I was conscious as to what I was saying because I knew what I was saying may trigger some persons in terms of an angry response. And this was a space with other men. So what I did is I tried to, my colleagues tell me, the team tells me I should be really careful, but I tried to tiptoe around the issue. And hope that somebody sees me tiptoeing around the issue and gets what I'm trying to get at. And thankfully that was the case to some extent. That the one person on the panel saw how I was, trying to not necessarily be extremely blatant because I didn't want people to feel that I was coming as an opposer, but how I was trying to ensure that within this conversation with men, that there were certain principles that often sometimes are not in conversations when, in men's spaces, generally speaking. Yeah. I see. Yeah, you. I think you.
I fully understand, and it go, so like you're touching on the soft skills again. You're touching on being able to navigate difficult conversations with grace, and also giving yourself grace. And then you mentioned that word again, that feminist word that people are very fearful of. And um, I was doing a proposal writing workshop. So when you're writing proposals, you have to tell the funding agency why you are aligned with them, what policies, what it is that allows y'all to blend to get an accomplished goal. And in telling persons that, well, this funding agency views views life this way, using this policy, and it was an immediate uproar from one of the men in the room.
I can imagine.
And he tried to derail the entire conversation because why not manliness? Why it has to be feminist? And
I've never heard that one. That's a new one. Wow. That's wow. Wow. Okay.
yeah, and I had to try to tiptoe around respecting his views, because if that is his
Yeah.
persuasion, in this place, I'm not in a position to debate you about that, but I'm in a position to be saying that it's not what you think it is.
It is. Yeah.
And politely trying to be
Respectfully disruptive.
and take control of the room back. So I can imagine on a panel is because you don't want to just be like, so well, I disagree with my panel member, but you want to.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I'm still learning, I've gotten better at it, but one of the things that I'm still also learning is don't be a bystander.
Oh,
And I don't mean that, when I say that, I mean, and looking at it from a very deep perspective. Because oftentimes in male spaces, especially in Caribbean male spaces, some of the things that we have based ourselves upon are extremely different from other men's groups. So, for example, WeTalkingBois, we try very hard to ensure that we stick to a feminist approach. And thankfully, we have colleagues who are very, they're in terms of the academic space, and they help us and keep us in check. We have principles of accountability that aligns with feminist approaches. That is not the case with many men's organizations. And oftentimes we find ourselves in lockerheads. And sometimes I just, early starts of WeTalkingBois, I would just sit there and just shake my head. I would just sit there and shake my head. But I am learning how to kind of tiptoe. It's sad that we have to tiptoe around these issues, but understanding the space that you're in. Because sometimes, unfortunately, in terms of conversations with men, in terms of men's groups, sometimes they're saying things not because, sometimes it's kind of like a lack of education, or they may not be aware of this thing. And how do we tackle that? Because we don't want, again, one core principles we're talking about is we are encouraging, I think the correct word now is positive masculinity. But also understanding that for the everyday man, he's not thinking about masculinity or femininity. The everyday man may be thinking about, I need to provide for my family, and not necessarily seeing it as a gendered role or, all these different things. So how do we engage with these persons, as you correctly said, without offending them? Because they're our target audience. And being a bystander and sitting there and watching it, it's not going to help anything. And it's really tricky. So that's one of the things that I've been slowly learning to do. And unfortunately, in by learning, you have a few awkward mistakes. Because I remember this one time, it was summer, I wrote a very beautiful question, in my opinion. I even sent it to some colleagues to cross-check it, to make sure that it was thing.
Yeah.
And my delivery of the question was just like...
Like, this is what I have to say. You heard me? Okay, cool. Good.
And I took at least 2 minutes to ensure it was not, it was very carefully orchestrated. And that was a mistake I made. Mm-hmm. And it was slightly awkward, but in the end, it was a lesson learned. Yeah.
You're taking me back to some of my so my master's is in gender and development.
What?
And I'm like listening to you talk, and I'm like, so this is what they call patriarchal bargaining, and I find that it's not only women that do it. And okay, and this theory is, and I'm loving this for me, and I hope the audience is also enjoying this, that what we call everyday life, we're not doing it alone. Mm-hmm. That other persons are facing the same challenges that we're facing, and it's about having that support to help you navigate, having that support to be like, well, this is a soft skill that you need. You need to learn how to figure out how to send an email with a little compassion in it so that the reader doesn't feel like you're attacking them.
Dear XYZ, I hope you're well. I hope this email finds you in good spirits.
Yeah. One of my friends was like, apparently I'm not supposed to say hello, state the request, and press send.
You're supposed to give a gentle greeting. I hope this email finds you in the best of spirits.
Yes. Those soft skills. We're not all just born with it,
But I mean, again, kind of like distract. I guess it depends on the space, because there are spaces where I've seen, hi, Ranako, the request, sign off.
I feel like that comes after you have the relationship with the person. But like and that's the thing, and that's why I told you it was hard for me, like that nuance, like knowing which space do I behave this way versus which space do I don't have that natural emotional intelligence that most people have. Like I don't have a high one, which is hilarious. Because
you're doing a really good job now.
Because in contrast, I'm a very deeply caring person.
Interesting.
So it is a contrast. It is a very stark contrast of my task-focused brain just wanting to get X, Y, and Z done. Because it needs to be done. Like, you got my emails. You saw... Ranako said yes to one podcast. I got like 4 emails from you. And each one had details in it. Because I'm not going to leave any task or any subtask not said, just in case,
It was really helpful, because even when it came to the end, I read one, so it was really helpful.
So that's one part of Karen. And then the other part is that I will probably give you all my money if you ask me. And you give me a sad story, and I'm going to be like...
No, you see, and as you're a trainee, I'm going to bring up that experience, because I remember that was one of the experiences I had in Trinidad. And I was like, because we went, where did we go? We went to town, like, you guys don't know what town is.
What's a space?
And we were going back to the car, and I saw, even today the imagery still sticks. There was this lady in I guess like a building's windowsill, mm-hmm. and she was selling, and I can't remember what exactly she was selling. But then there was this kid, and, the Bajan folk was like, wow, damn, ouch. And then my training friend was like, just be careful, because not everybody that you see doing that is actually in need. And I was like, oh.
I mean...
But it was rough.
That's also another one of a Karen conflict that you've opened a door to.
Oh, boy.
Because I'm small. For those listening, I'm small, and I not necessarily the most observant of what's going on at times as well, because I'm in my head with my list of my tasks to do, right? So I don't like to give money to persons on the road, because if I stop to open my wallet on the road, I don't know what else is going to happen, because I'm going to be so focused on that task that I'm not going to see if somebody else is coming to just snatch my wallet and run. So I'm not going to do that willingly, because that's a safety thing for me.
I think understanding the Trinidad context and having my many culture shocks, I understand. I will never forget the first time I went to Trinidad and we were looking for the place. I was clearly too accustomed to Barbados. And I was walking about with my tablet and I was just like, where's this place? And then my friend comes up to me and I'm like, Ranako, you need to put that up. And I'm like, y'all said that this was a safe space? And my little Bajan mind is like, this is totally comfortable. Like, we walk around with tablets and stuff like that. Not this kind of situation. But
I feel like I have to defend Trinidad.
I'm not saying, no, I'm not saying. I think, like, for most places, there's always crime, and it's
Right.
always an acknowledgement of being aware of your surroundings. And in that situation, I was not aware
You were not being aware
of my surroundings. Because, again, a similar situation can very much happen in Barbados. Huh?
It could.
Very much happen in
could.
Barbados. So,
It could, but we're not going to do a competition to see who.
no, we're all equal. We're all equal.
But yeah, so like my task focus mind is always at war with my compassion, and I did sort of want to teach the life skills, and like I had no clue how I was going to do good, and unfortunately, I was often told that I would have to marry rich, that I'm taking a vow of poverty, and that like all these non-encouraging ways when I said I was studying social work, that I wanted to work in a children's home and these things, and I've just been stubborn because for some reason that's the way the Lord made me. And in doing the good, I realized I didn't necessarily have like good boundaries, and I had to take the step back. So that's why I'm doing good now from behind a laptop than necessarily on the front line, because somebody beat you. Whether or not I could fight, I'm probably going to be like, so when we squaring up next? because you are now my child, you are now my whatever, so therefore I'm writing. And I'm also trying to figure out like how could I make your entire like, so lack of boundaries really affected my ability to do good effectively. And I had to learn boundaries, and I had to do a lot of this self-work, and I'm behind the laptop now, which is good. And it allows me to sort of merge the two versions of Karen, the task-focused Karen and the doing good, want to be on the field, want to change the world kind of thing. And it took a journey. I had to remember often people over projects. Because I'll get
so caught up in
so focused on the task that I don't know what time I'm messaging you, what time I'm emailing you, or I just want my task. I want
it done.
I want to be able to be like completed.
Yeah, and I think funny thing is you do things and you don't necessarily think about these things. Because again, WeTalkingBois, the executive team in Barbados is extremely small. There's only myself and more recently about 2 other persons. And it's always difficult because the executive team, for the most part, volunteers a lot of their time.
Yeah.
And there's so much that we would love to do. But we always have to keep that in mind that, here we are all volunteering our time. And there are times where projects would be upcoming and I would apologize. I would message the executive committee and say, I'm sorry, but you're going to hear my voice a lot this week. I'm going to work with you. So if there's anything, please say apologies for any late messages, because I'm one of those persons that, strangely, before I go to bed, I just have like this weekly meeting in my head about everything that I'm supposed to do or everything that I should have done or or things that are coming. And, thankfully, the team were really close. But then it came to a point where I asked myself, what if that was me?
Yeah.
And then in doing that now, I kind of backtracked a little bit. So whereas, thank God for WhatsApp drafts now.
Yeah.
So whereas I would, have those moments, I would not send it. I would wait until the following day to send it.
And then when you wake up and you will see the draft, oh, that's a good idea. That's a good idea.
And then if anything, if anything may be influenced by me thinking it's a priority, but the team understanding it's not a priority, I could change it.
Okay.
Because then I've had the time to like kind of sleep on it. Because I think, let's be real, for some things, for us as persons within this space leading the efforts, everything is a priority.
It is.
Everything is a priority. But yeah, because
Did you do the media right? It is. Did you book the caterer? It is.
But prioritizing in terms of what is a priority now, because a lot of the work that we've been trying to uphold and going into kind of media is elevating our marcoms, particularly around everything that we do. Because in the first couple of years, we were one of those persons where we would do a lot of things, but we only have record that we did it because we know we were there, and there may be some email or WhatsApp chain saying that we were there.
Yeah.
Because we were those persons, we show up, we did what we had to do.
And rural.
So, getting, obviously, because some target audience, we may not be able to take pictures, but getting some documented photos.
Picture of the place, the building. You alone in front of the building.
Something, right?
Yeah.
And with that means increase
Yeah.
marcoms. And I'm really always on the marcoms because
Marketing and communications. Because it's another chicken and the egg thing. So
I didn't say it like that.
Yeah, it is a chicken and an egg, because if I do a project budget and I put a budget line towards communication, which is a change, because before they didn't use some funding agencies didn't necessarily wanted to see that, but now they want to see it. But that means I have less money going towards the project itself now. However, if I put that communications line in and other funding agencies see me and see my good work, I
In the
get
long run.
more money in the long run. But
Yeah.
right now,
It's
I'm not getting to do the full impact, or I'm not seeing the full impact that I wanted to see.
yeah, and
So it's a chicken and an egg thing in our sector.
yeah, and it's I'm saying it's weird, but it's not weird because
And then they will tell you that it's not marketing. It's visibility and communications. We don't market. We're social development.
and I guess you share similar experiences. The reality is, many of us, well, some of us, I don't know if all of us, but some of us are genuinely doing these things as passion projects. So we don't really care about the pictures or whatever. And I remember there was something that I was applying for, and it kept asking about like articles about what you were doing, and I was like, that's a really interesting one to find now. How am I going to find these? And I think it's weird that we kind of have to be somewhat PRs, even though we are solely focused and very passionate about the project. But yeah, marcoms has become a important
Yeah.
key thing.
It's proof that the work is done, and then it's also a way to establish yourself as a thought leader, establish your organization as connected to your beneficiaries, and attract other funding agencies. And fortunately and unfortunately, because media is so attainable now, everybody thinks that you can teach yourself it.
I wish.
But when am I going to teach myself it and also earn money to afford to teach myself it?
Yeah, because I remember, I think I always thought I was really good at graphics until somebody asked me to do a graphic for something. And I did it, and I thought, oh, that was pretty nice. And then the person looks at me and asks me, do you think this is a church fish fry?
Wow.
So with that reality check, I did not. Well, this was not for WeTalkingBois. This is separately. So with that reality check, going into WeTalkingBois, I absolutely do not touch anything marcoms. I simply act as a feedback type of perspective, knowing
Yeah.
knowing buddy, marcoms not for you, buddy.
Oh my God. Yeah. And that's the importance of knowing your audience and knowing who you're communicating with and who you need the visibility with and who you're planning to attract with your work in WeTalkingBois and in the social development sector. But we talked all about our challenges. Is there anything that makes you happy about doing this work?
I think, what makes me happy about doing this work, I think, to start, in terms of the internal aspect, is the relationship of the executive team and how I've seen some of them actually grown. That sounds like I'm old, but
It sounds like you value human relationship.
so for example, the guy who's leading marketing now, when we first started, we could never get him to, for example, he was shy. So things when it comes to hosting Instagram lives or even hosting podcast episodes, they would shy away from. Today, if I ask for somebody to host, I can rest assured they're going to volunteer first. So just seeing that growth and, it's seeing the growth within each of us because we all would have started at some point. And, though we work to assist, work with men and boys, the work has always helped us in terms of our own personal development in many ways. And I think for me, that's one of the definite things. Obviously, outside of the internal team, seeing positive interactions with men and boys. Oftentimes we may not be able to see what happens further down the line, but just being able to, go into a space and other men just feel comfortable and I love when they start to talk because when they start to talk, you're going to get some really good conversation. And once they understand that effectively nothing is off topic. Obviously, we may have limitations in terms of time, but just being able to.
So you love creating a safe space.
Yeah, and
that's what I'm hearing.
Internally, I've been hearing the word safe space all weekend. Internally, in terms of the gender world, there's always a conversation if it's safe or brave space, and.
Oh, I've never heard that one.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
So like a safe.
You're teaching me so much. Oh.
That's interesting. I didn't see myself as a teacher today, but the whole conversation is around brave space. Not only because oftentimes people say that this is a safe space, and it's kind of cliche sometimes when people say this is a safe space, and oftentimes it is a safe space, but people don't feel safe. So I don't know how to fully explain the difference between, but brave is kind of embodying that.
And you're putting the person in a position of power, that they're being brave to share their story, not that you are being, that it's more active on the person who's actually sharing.
And makes them feel because obviously
more
some
empowered to share.
Because a lot of the things sometimes may not, having a safe space is fine.
Yeah.
But you really need brave spaces for persons to, kind of...
To be vulnerable.
That's it. So there's this conversation around brave and, safe spaces. But at the moment, they're both interchangeably used.
But I see it. I see it, though, because it's like the shift from calling victim versus survivor. So it's like, I'm not a victim of gender-based violence, I'm a survivor, which means that even though this happened to me, I'm not going to wear it as a negative label. Like I actively took steps and I'm living and empowering. So a safe space is like the facilitator created the space, yes, but I'm being brave. I'm the one that is walking through those doors and sharing of myself. And I thank you for introducing that thought, Pastor. That thought, yeah.
Because I am super thankful, really thankful to be, have colleagues in the gender space. I technically am as well.
Yes, you are in the gender space.
But in terms of that academic knowledge, oftentimes I think sometimes men's groups tend to shy away from it. But it helps in terms of informed decisions and having, blending academia with experiences.
Yes, which is needed.
It's always great because we oftentimes, we try to, we don't necessarily say it verbatim or depending on the group, we're not going to use any jargon. But we're going to say the same thing, but it's going to be in a more appropriate way for our audience. And that blend has, so far, been working really good for us. Yeah.
I think that's very powerful, that you are deliberate, that you are intentional with the work that you're doing at We Talking Boys and creating this safe, brave space for other men, because often, yes, when you hear of a men's group, it I think of the men's group in on Parks and Rec, where they were protesting the fact that Ben was supporting his wife, and that having a woman leader is going to lead to the detriment of men. And you're saying that's not the type of men's group that we are. We the type where you could come and you could talk to us, and we will not just preach to you, but we're gonna build a relationship, be intentional, and allow you to ask questions, allow you to think through changing your thoughts to maybe a positive thought, maybe challenging the way you were brought up, which is not easy.
Yeah, and I think it definitely isn't easy. And I remember the founding team when we first started, I said to them, the reality is what we're trying to achieve here. We may very much all die and never see it. Social change takes a couple years before you can actually see it. And though that is a reality, and though that is always in the back of our minds, we still know that we really need to, even if it's just our little 2%, in, as I said, building that relationship. And one of the things that we found is not coming from that immediate judgment perspective, but allow you to say whatever you want to say. Even if we may raise eyebrows when you say what you say.
Yeah.
And then talking about it. And again, with relationships, we did relationships, and it went kind of along the lines of romantic relationships. It was such a popular topic. We actually had to do Instagram lives on relationships. And even sometimes when we did, because we had this thing where we're trying to start our back now, where we would have done random Instagram lives, and the guys would just join us, and it would just be whatever vibe we decide the vibe is. It would, for those first 2 years, it would always go back to relationships. And I remember one Instagram live, we were just vibing as we usually do, and a comment was made in terms of a romantic relationship between a young man and a girl, and some of us were in the same space, so we looked at each other and was like, oh boy, here we go. And the reality is, at that time, some other males were in agreement, and we were like, okay, how do we tackle this? And we kind of allowed the person to continue, and then we flipped the switch. So then when we flipped the switch and put them in a position, it kind of stopped. They didn't necessarily
want to continue.
They didn't necessarily say, yo, you were right, but they paused. And that's all we need.
That's all we need.
That simple pause. And then there's sometimes where we had to kind of take a roundabout approach in addressing the issue. But ensure that we don't, we're not preaching, or we're not we hope that we can change your mindset, but that's, for us to go in to say that we're going to change somebody's mindset, it's not going to work.
You're managing your own expectations. And I love that. That's something that we need, and to avoid burnout in doing good, we need to be able to manage our own expectations and be like, we're not going to solve world hunger from this project.
But we can do a little bit
to
ensure that, I'm trying to think of a random page name, but ensure that John and his family are eating for the night.
Yes. So that John is able to eat, and that also that they have good communication skills. They have good interpersonal skills, because that's what you're focused on good interpersonal skills to ensure that we can have a sort of equal gender relations throughout society. And that's such important work. So I have a section where I ask persons, what advice would you give to future do-gooders?
I don't know if I have any, I don't know if I'm the right person to give advice.
But Why not? Not to make this into a therapy session. Why do you think you're not the right person to give advice? You have a podcast, you have an organization that's been going on for 4 years, and you're incorporated. Come on, yeah. Why you're not?
No, we're still going through the incorporation process, but we had.
Well, that is a journey.
Let's not talk about that. Yeah, I think, and that's often sometimes
The challenge of doing good. It's not easy. It's not.
the incorporation process is a pain sometimes, but I don't know what advice I give to other do-gooders. I think what I said earlier, I think that's would be my advice. Like, understand that and I guess it's kind of just general advice because I find that because of social media, we often see things and we think that this is reality. But being bold, being brave, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. I think for me, in terms of reflecting on my own journey with We Talking Boys, the moment where I stopped, and I don't want to sound bad, but where I stopped caring so much about
What other person say?
not only what other person is saying, but making mistakes and seeing mistakes as a reflection of me not being competent or me not being able, rather than seeing it as, okay, this mistake was made because of XYZ. What can I do in my reflection to go through it? So I think, being brave and don't be afraid to make the mistakes, and kind of what we both mentioned earlier, having that support system. Because there are days where you are going to be like, why am I doing this?
Yes. Yes.
Why am I doing this? Like, we want to do this. We've partnered with this body, but it's an interesting partnership. Or we want to do this, but 0, money sign, right?
Yep.
And obviously when We Talking Boys first started, and we still do it to some extent now, a lot of the funds, I mean, we were doing small activities, came out of our own pockets. And I mean, we're happy to do that.
Yeah.
But as you grow, it becomes
Challenging.
and unsustainable. And again, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, understanding that at the present moment, like, effectively they're part-time volunteers.
Yeah.
Like, all of the executive team are part-time volunteers. We all have our 9-to-5s, our boring 9-to-5s that we do every day.
Family at home.
So I think all of those things
All
would
those
be.
things. When you keep saying don't be afraid of the opposition, I remember one time I was in distress over, like, I'm always in distress. I'm a very emotional person. And my father said, always remember that you don't pelt a mango tree when it's not bearing. And that reminded me of that. Don't be afraid, because if they pelting you, that means that you're bearing fruit and good things are coming.
Yeah, and I think the team, the executive co-founders, there's this joke, unfortunately, about, so there's this one time, just some context so persons understand what I'm talking about. There's this one time we were at a friend's house and we were having a party, a pool party, whatever. And Ranako, knowing well that at the time he couldn't swim, just thought it would be really, we were playing, I don't know what we were playing, but the ball was about to go in the pool. And within that split second, Ranako was more focused on saving the ball than anything else. And the ball went on the deepest side of the pool. And I ran, slammed the ball out of the pool, and straight into the deepest end of the pool.
Can I tell you, I have a similar story.
and then had to be rescued.
So I think, no, you make me feel good. Because I use this story to explain who I am. If I see something in danger or something in need, I'm going to try to fill it. So I was in primary school.
Okay.
And I went to a private school. So they had swim meets and all these things. And they were going to have a swimming competition. And you would go in my houses. And they had a race. And nobody would volunteer. And I was like, well, the adult needs somebody to raise their hand. So I No.
Oh boy.
And I went to the swim meet. Did not tell my parents anything. I was just going to the swim meet as part of school's activities, you know. Went, jumped into the pool, went straight down. Until a hand came down and pulled me out. And this is a story that my parents tell to this day. And I used to be really embarrassed by the story until I finally did the week to realize, but that's just me. If something is needed,
You just dive into
I'm just going to dive in. The lack of boundaries.
Sorry. I thought.
And when my mother asked me why,
There was absolutely no explanation.
because of course I know this now. Now that I've watched all these therapy tapes and whatever else. But at that age, it was just like, well, they needed somebody to do it.
And you were there to do it.
Whether or not I was qualified or not.
Totally ignoring that you weren't qualified.
Similarly, you were like, somebody needed to do it.
And dive straight into
And
the
dive
deep
straight in. And that's something that I think probably do-gooders do. That we need to sometimes step back and be like, no. We can't rescue everybody, and we can't take part in everything just because somebody needs to do it.
I think, and that's a really good thing in terms of setting boundaries, and I think that's probably one of my things. Because realistically speaking, I mean, let's be real. So for example, I guess can frame it into WeTalkingBois. Within WeTalkingBois, there's like every 16 days of activism around International Men's Day, 16 days of activism. We know we're going
16 days of activism runs from the 25th
5th to
of November to the 10th of December.
25th being the International Day of the Elimination of Violence Against Women and Girls, and the 10th being International Human Rights Day. But, we have busy periods at WeTalkingBois, and I'm the type of, unfortunately, also dive in the deep end. And there have times where I have, they were like, when persons ask me to do something, yeah, sure, bam, bam, bam. How are you going to get this too, buddy? Like, and then you only ask yourself that after the question. I mean, even more recently, it happened to me, and thankfully, because of things out of my control, one event got moved. So, in the
I
context.
feel like this is a good point to tell you that Leanne, in her closing, to advice to to future do-gooders was, I tell Ranako to take off his phone and lie down in his bed. So I'm just going to remind you.
You see, Leanne?
Boundaries. We don't always have to rescue the ball. And I'm speaking to you and myself.
Because, realistic, again, a case in point today, and so I'm traveling next week, and there was something for work, and I got a call. Ranako, can you do this XYZ? I said, sure, yeah. I'm gonna be there. After the call, I realized that's the day before I travel, and the day before the day that I do travel, I have a whole day workshop, and I need to get on a plane after this whole day workshop. And I remember sending a voice note to two of my executive committee members in WeTalkingBois, and I said, well, I can't say what I said.
Yes.
Because it was very vocal in what I said. And I said, I literally asked them, am I stupid? Like, I know my schedule is already packed.
Yeah.
I already have increased demand because I need to get things done before I travel. But yeah, I said, yeah, I'll be there. Knowing full well.
I feel like your word for 2025 is boundaries.
So Leanne is very hands-on
And
point.
exploring all the issues that are stopping you from having good boundaries. It's not going to be pretty as somebody who spent a lot of work trying to figure it out. It's not going to be pretty seeing yourself in the mirror.
Yeah, because I think sometimes we often, because unfortunately, I'm not sure if you have experienced that. I think that was kind of my come to Jesus moment in terms of, trying to act. I mean, I'm not the best at it. Still haven't gotten the the nice big tickets yet, but getting there. But my come to Jesus moment was very much where I was doing. And then after the period of silence where I needed to relax, one, I couldn't relax because it was so weird. I found things for myself to do. And then secondly, I actually got sick.
Yeah, your body will take you rest if you
Like-
don't give it rest.
And that period was like, everybody was like, yeah, you did this to yourself. And that was a come to Jesus moment. Still not the best at it in terms of saying.
You'll get there, but
But-
you're gonna have to do personal work to get there.
Yeah.
And as if you want to face yourself in the mirror, which is not always the easiest thing.
It's hard.
It is.
it's hard because even again we talk about being vulnerable, and the team reminds me that I don't need to be so filtered in certain conversations. But even reflecting on a conversation last night, and I think probably unknown to males, but I was actually talking to an ex-partner, and we were reflecting on things that would have happened, and because I've been able to do some work, I was able to connect that with some things that I didn't necessarily even think
Yeah.
about. And they were like, and they said to me, why? They said, if this was the type of conversation we had then, the outcome would have been totally different. But in understanding that at that time, I was
You
not,
didn't have any tools.
I was
Yeah.
not that person. So yeah, it's always looking yourself in the mirror and knowing when to address certain things, whether it be on your own or even seeking help. It's rough.
It is.
And for men, it's rougher. Rougher is not a word, but
No, I get you. But the work that you do
Yeah.
would require you also to look
inward.
inward. So thank you so much, Ranako. Thank you for teaching me so much today. I love the line of if women could have solved this by now, it would have been solved. I think I just butchered your line.
No, I summarize what the author is saying. So I kind of butcher the author, but because the author did specify what exactly.
Okay.
But yeah.
And then also the brave, safe spaces. I love that. We could probably merge it together because make it look like if the facilitator is working with and not, saving those who are in the space as well. And I just want to thank you for reminding us that it's okay to make mistakes.
That was also a self-reminder as well, but
It's okay to make mistakes and give yourself grace. Yeah. So thank you so much for being on this podcast.
thank you for having me.